The last speaker of this session is, yes, Professor Stanislaw Krajewski from the Faculty of Philosophy from the University of Warsaw, who will tell us something about interreligious dialogue. And the title of the talk is On the Oscillation Model and its Logic. And yeah, as I guess, it is referred to the interreligious dialogue. So, Professor
Right.
Krajewski, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will not be covering a well-known area as most of the other speakers did, some of them in a very interesting and novel way, but I am going to speak about the issue that has not really been explored, or and certainly not as an issue for logical research. And this is this oscillation phenomenon or model of some situations, which is really truly inspired to me. It has been inspired by considering the interreligious dialogue. So let me share the screen so that I hope I can do it. Can you see it? Please tell me, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, it's okay. Yes? Okay, good. So, so that is what is the oscillation process? I will tell you in a moment, but first let me give an example that this first and I would say original example to me, but the oscillation process going from one side to the other and back again, this is something that can be found in many other situations. So interfaith dialogue is my first example. Basically, it's, we have two approaches to religions that we can have when we think about interreligious dialogue, more generally too, but let's think about this. Namely, the first approach is objective or universal, or it's really supra-religious. That is, we look at religions from a neutral point of view, which is an outsider's approach, or rather perhaps a view from above, like a bird's eye view. And so religions look a bit, like a chain of mountains. Each religion is a mountain. There is a chain of mountains, and we can describe or discuss each peak, or compare them and do things like this. This is something that we really do when we are involved in the history or in the science of religion, in sociological, historical, philosophical study of religions. And the approach two is the subjective, which is inevitably particularistic approach, and religion specific. That is, we somehow understand what a religion is not by looking from the far away, but by being on one of the mountains. And when we can say, when we are on one of the mountains, that this mountain is something that we know from very well, we are close to it. The other mountains we can see from some distance, and we can of course do all the comparison and other things, but we are have this ground where we are located, and this is important. And we can say that if we are not somehow connected to one of those peaks, we don't really know what is about, because we have just a general view which can be from a distance, which is really not the same. So we can say that, in order to perceive what is really religion, or what is important religion or religions, you have to be somehow religious. If you are completely non-religious, that you really don't know what you are talking about. Like, if somebody is completely blind from birth, one wouldn't be able to talk about colors. Even if one is educated and intelligent, one can of course talk about the wavelengths and all those things, the physical description of colors, but not about colors as we understand them. So this is these are the two approaches. Actually, even okay. So the point is that both approaches are important, significant, useful, and actually inevitable. And in fact, in the real life interfaith meetings, you can find both. And, both are natural. And both are problematic in its own way. So, if it's this approach, objective approach, it can be too theoretical and really, assuming too much of a common denominator to start with. And the approach two can be too particularistic, that you are so close to something that as being religion or religious, that you are not able to understand the aspects which are different in other religions. But they are both unavoidable, because when we talk about religions, they naturally come. I can argue for this point more, but perhaps this doesn't. We don't have time for that now. Again, okay. Now we can connect those to two principles that are, I find, interesting, expressed in an interesting way, and in a good way, some I would say commandments of interfaith dialogue. One is the principle of respect. Respect the dialogue partner. Strive to look at his or her religiosity through her eyes. And this is something that is really very often emphasized. At the same time, it's important to also observe the principle of faithfulness. Be true to your religious identity. Do not compromise or water down your own religion or religious tradition. So the two approaches are important. Both are invoked as important elements of a real, fruitful, deep, genuine interfaith encounter. So even though they look a bit, that it may be hard to combine them, they can be combined, and they are both present in real life dialogues in my experience. So they are largely compatible. They have contradictory suggestions concerning this panorama of the religions, of the other religions, because if you assume the principle of respect, then really one should look at things from the partner's perspective. But of course, the extent of the possible identification with the other religion is limited, after all, if it's not my religion. So one, naturally shifts to this more objective, scientific, whatever, sociological approach, which is approach one. But assuming the second, the principle of faithfulness, one should be, of course, very close to one's own religiosity, which means to be closer to approach two. And so naturally both approaches emerge as inevitable, natural, useful, as I said. So if you imagine an encounter, what is happening is that we have both approaches, but not at the same time. Each of those it can happen and does happen, but each, is insufficient, so it has to be changed to the other and then the other way. So what we have really is something like this. We go from approach 1 to 2, from 2 to 1 and back. And this is this oscillation process that I talked about. Now, there are two important points. One is that both approaches are important and good. The second is that in the given moment, you are not supposed to, or it's not possible to have both approaches at the same time. And next is that if you have one approach, then you realize at some point that it's not enough and you get to the other approach. And then with the other approach, it's the same situation. You feel it's insufficient at some point, so you go to the first one, and so on and so on. Now, as you know, there is another example which is connected to Franz Rosenzweig's theological philosophy, but oscillation is a process occurring in time. I will just maybe leave it and go to the other interfaith dialogue example, which is connected to the ideas introduced by Martin Buber, this I-thou relations, which is a very important way of describing the dialogue relationship, or the dialogue, the real dialogue. That is, I-thou is important. So the approach one is like thou, that we have to, the dialogue partner has to be treated as a thou, as a, in a personal way, as a person, fully, completely accepted, etc. And in fact, both him and some other theories like Levinas, ethical relationship notion, are very important to understand the dialogue, but it's about interhuman dialogue, basically. And the interhuman dialogue in this approach, although for both of them, Buber and Levinas, the theological or religious examples are very important sources of inspiration, but in that description, the dialogue relation is really, about rather abstracted humans. Only humanity of the humans is important. The face for Levinas, the thou for Buber. And this is not enough for a description of the interfaith dialogue, because in interfaith dialogue we are faced not only with an individual, but also with the whole, religious background of that individual. And so it's, to put it in a very short way, it's the he, the plural you, thou is the singular you, and he is the plural you, which is the second approach. And again, those two approaches, they can be seen as the oscillation between them can be seen as something most important. There are other examples, just to be not too far from religion. For example, characterizing Jews as a group. One can apply the approach one, a sociological category, religion, a people, a nation, a tribe, or something more specific like a unique, sui generis entity, which is, of course, something that is present in the Jewish tradition. And you can have one or the other, and you usually have both, but not at the same time, and you go from one to the other and back very often. This also can be described more. Now, the problem is that there is something very similar in all those examples, it seems, to the familiar physical examples, like the particle versus wave approach to matter. So the vision of complementarity. And so my question is whether those examples and other examples of a similar kind are essentially different or not. And if we can have the more say the logic of that process that would be different from the logic of complementarity, if there is any. There are some attempts, and in fact some of them have inspired me, but is there a good logic of complementarity in physics? It's another question. So to try to show what I mean is, in Mozart's logic of that oscillation process can be investigated. Let me say that that, for example, we have this idea of paraclassical logic, which is a variety of the paraconsistent logic approach, namely that we have A is the a set of sentences that can be inconsistent, but we can still consider, only consistent subsets. Like in this case, we have the basic assumption plus approach one is one consistent subset, and the other consistent subset is the basic assumptions plus approach two. And we see what follows. So both, branches or both parts, consistent parts, have some consequences, and each of those consequences is important to us. That's the basic idea. So if you have two consistent parts of A and some common A0, so it's have the A0 plus alpha. Alpha is like approach one, beta like approach two. So if we can say T plus S is the consequences of both, alpha can be just the negation of beta, or beta negation of alpha. That's also a possibility, although not necessarily. It can be also something that is, it may be is incompatible, but not directly the negation. So anyway, so the consequences of the common assumptions are in both, and they are equal if beta is the negation of alpha, or equivalent to it in A0. Okay, this can be developed a little bit, but the whole point, if it's they are not equivalent in if the non-equivalence is in A0, then the inclusion is sharp. Okay, and so that's nothing much, but basically we have now the problems. So the logic, as you see, can be this paraclassical logic. At least this is the first approximation. And now, how to express the fact that alpha and beta are not just sentences, but they are general principles that are somehow outside the initial theory. It's outside this A0. So it's A0 plus alpha, A0 plus beta, but alpha and beta are here, their approaches. It's not the same as some statements or some theological dogmas or theological positions. It's an approach. It's something different. So can we express that in a more logical framework? This is my question. I don't know the answer, so I rather ask the question. There is one way I can think we can approach the point, but the problem, but it's not really, I don't know if it's appropriate here. Namely, one of the ways to express general principles about the theory, which are on the level of meta theory, is to say that they are, for example, that this is a meta principle, meta statement involving, for example, the concept of truth, the notion of truth or satisfaction for the given theory. This is something I've been also working on. So this naturally comes to me, but is it a good example? I'm not sure. Or is it a Google inspiration? I'm not sure. Now, even a more important point is that the oscillation is a process. It's the process in time, happening in time. So one moment alpha is assumed, the next beta, and then again and again, and somehow, we are forced to go from one to the other. Not just that we can do it, we are forced by the situation that develops. So this process happening in time must be somehow expressed. So it's the sequence of moments, and we can say that we have a sequence of theories, and perhaps rather that it's not the sequence of theories, but it's that we have this alternating theories: A1, A2, A1, A2, A1, A2 in even moments, one in the odd moments, the other. So this can perhaps be called the sequential paraclassical logic, just to indicate the fact that it's a process and that the change occurs in time. But this is just an idea. There's nothing more I can say, unfortunately. So this would be this sequential paraclassical logic, and the point is whether we can this alpha and beta, whether they can be properly expressed and the process expressed. We can also imagine, it a bit more complicated. For example, that we have a growing theory on each level, both alpha and beta, and because it grows bigger a bit from moment to moment, but it doesn't really change the point significantly. It's still just an idea. So basically, these are the two big problems, and the third problem would be how to have the answers to both problem one and problem two combined, so that they are, that we have a framework or theory, an approach that gives the answers to both at the same time. This is my question, and this is basically what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Professor Krajewski. And now we have at least 5 minutes for questions, so I invite you all to ask the questions. This is the last talk, so even if we have some more, we can spend some more time, because there will be a break after this talk. Are there any?
Yeah, I know it's a very unusual topic and a very unusual approach, but maybe somebody has an idea that can help me.
Yes, somebody has. I thought that Karani has written yes, that there is a question, but it's another older answer. Okay, so I have one, and it refers directly to these approaches, what you call approaches. Yeah. So this alpha and beta. Does it mean that it can be the way or some inference rules, or rules of inference, or also, because you say you don't think only about the statements but some approach, so what would it be? Some premises that are hidden, some hidden premises, or some rules that we use, or maybe some rules, hermeneutic rules, I don't know. Could you tell us something more about this, what you call approach? What would be the elements of this fuzzy set?
The original examples have two approaches to the matter. The approach to the dialogue partner, for example, or
Ah,
the
so
approach to the religion of the dialogue partner, or the religions as such, that we can try to, so it's on another level. It's at another level. It's not a question of even of rules or logical rules of inference, anything like that. Not really. That's why I have this the problem here. It's more like, the definition of truth, which is on the higher level, but it's the whole approach, really. I don't have a better term.
okay, I think I understand. And to clarify, we don't. This is not the same as approach 1 and 2 to the interface dialogue that you mentioned at the beginning, but we are talking about this, yeah, this alpha and beta. So this um, what differs one person and the second person who want to communicate, yeah, and this is it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and
The
okay,
whole,
I understand that
that's
it's
the whole issue.
name
Now
it.
I see another question here.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh yeah, we have.
you have some commentary on religious intolerance on the logical point of view. I mean, you mean from the logical point of view. Religious intolerance is a very important and a very distressing phenomenon that has been with us, for all those centuries. And it's very much with us. And it's something that I dislike, of course. Is the logical approach helpful here? I think that if you are logical and you are in one framework, then intolerance comes naturally, because then you somehow think that you are the only in the right framework. It's a bit like, with those geometries, when you think that the Euclidean geometry is right, then anything that comes from the realm of another geometry seems simply wrong. But when you think that there could be various geometries, then of course the situation is different. I think it's a bit similar with religions, that you can, again, it's like those two approaches. That one approach is that there are various religions that are, look at them, and we are like above the religions. But then you think, no, that's not good enough, because then you don't really know what you're talking about. So let's try to be within one of the religions and look at the others from that point of view. But then in order to not to get into intolerance, you have to somehow overcome that. But the reason can be not just that you don't want to be intolerant, because that may be true for some people, for others it could be not that important. But maybe the reason can be something else, that you feel that to understand the other, if you really want to understand the other, you need to somehow change the point of view, so to change the approach. And so some sort of openness is needed. And to intolerance is connected with the lack of openness. And some people are more open, some are less open. And it's very hard to say why. I don't know if it has to do with logic so much. I am afraid it does not. And how to increase openness, that's a good question. And probably it has to do with, the way people are educated, or people are connected to other people, and within family and within other